This is Michael Popok, Legal AF, the pressure campaign against Walt Nauta, the current valet, butler, body man for Donald Trump, indicted with him twice in a conspiracy related to Mar-a-Lago and the obstruction of justice. And the destruction of video evidence continues. The Department of Justice has not given up hope that they can get Walt Nauta to flip on Donald Trump, which would be the nail in the coffin for Mar-a-Lago. Right now, the witnesses and the co-conspirators involved in the conspiracy are arrayed as follows. On the Trump side, who haven't yet flipped, you've got Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, the former maintenance worker. On the government side, as witnesses for the prosecution, you've got Yosel Taveras, the IT worker, who, along with Carlos de Oliveira and Walt Nauta, conspired to try to delete the video footage from the video surveillance cameras at Donald Trump's behest and instruction, according to the IT director. IT director has recently flipped, leading to the second indictment in Mar-a-Lago over this past summer. That's why we got a new indictment that now brought new felony charges against Donald Trump and brought in Carlos de Oliveira into the mix as well. The government has had a number of levels of pressure campaign going on in this case. They got Yosel Taveras to drop his lawyer that was bought and paid for by the Trump PAC and Trump himself, Stan Woodward, and testify truthfully. He actually recanted his testimony because he had already lied and perjured himself in the D.C. grand jury about not knowing a darn thing about the video surveillance footage. Until they got the video surveillance footage and showed it to him, he changed his lawyers at the behest of the chief judge of the D.C. Circuit Court supervising the grand juries at the time, Jeb Boasberg. And then he said, oh no, the light went on. He said, I better testify. Also, Yosel Taveras was freaked out after the indictment came out, and he was sort of mentioned, but not yet indicted. And that led to him then cooperating with the government, telling the truth, and turning on the others. Walt Nauta, the government still holds out hope, and they're continuing to pressure him. And that's what this whole, we've been reporting it on Legal AF, that's what this whole Garcia hearing process, which I will dive into a little bit here, that's been the purpose of it. Yes, the government probably believes that there's probably an ethical conflict between Stan Woodward, the lawyer who's currently representing Walt Nauta, and the fact that Stan Woodward used to represent a co-conspirator, Yosel Taveras, the IT worker, when he was lying to the government. And so, the government can't just sit back and say, well, we just had a witness who perjured himself with the lawyer that he was represented by, told the truth with the new lawyer, and the lawyer where he perjured himself is currently still in the case representing another co-conspirator. I mean, you can't let that sleeping dog lie, right? If you're the government, you got to do something about it. But I think the other reason that they filed their motion to either disqualify Stan Woodward to continue to represent his own client, Walt Nauta, the Butler valet body man, who holds the keys to a quick conviction of Donald Trump. I mean, Yosel Taveras is pretty strong testimony. He's going to say, Trump, my boss, told me to delete the security footage so the Department of Justice wouldn't get a hold of it. That sounds a lot like obstruction of justice, plain and simple. But you get Walt Nauta, who's been with Donald Trump since he was in the Navy, since he was assigned as part of his duties to work as the valet or the butler in the White House for Donald Trump, and then followed him into as a chief petty officer, and then left the Navy and followed him into private practice and working with him at Mar-a-Lago. You get him, that's a whole nother quick conviction for Donald Trump possibility. So they haven't given up hope even into October. I mean, July didn't do it when they brought the second indictment. That didn't make Walt Nauta, I mean, at least not publicly, change his view, even though they had him dead to rights on the video, and they had a witness against him. And the government has a very good timeline of all the bad things that Walt Nauta has done for Donald Trump, right? They've got recordings, they got video recordings, they've got witness testimony, they've got Donald Trump's current and former executive assistants working for him, testifying about Walt Nauta's role. So they haven't given up hope. So the current thinking was, let's go after his lawyer and cut his legs out from under him and make Walt Nauta come into court and recognize that Stan Woodward represented somebody in Yuscil Taveras who could and will testify against Walt Nauta in the courtroom, right? And that there's going to be a moment where Stan Woodward is going to have to cross-examine his own former client about why he's telling this story now, this truth story about the video evidence when I used to represent you, you told another story. A very awkward position for a lawyer to be in front of a jury. And it will likely undermine the credibility of Stan Woodward now that he has to do this whole song and dance in front of the jury. This is another reason that the government brought this. It was to damage the credibility of Stan Woodward as an advocate for Walt Nauta. Even though Walt Nauta is too stupid to know that he should fire Stan Woodward because of this conflict and hire an independent lawyer, because that lawyer is being paid for by his boss, who he still works for, he's not doing it. That is the intimidation campaign that's going on the other side to try to counteract the pressure campaign by the Department of Justice on Walt Nauta. I mean, even in the hearing in which Walt Nauta had to come to court and tell the federal judge and be cross-examined by the federal judge, Aileen Cannon, about whether he understood the ramifications of going forward with Stan Woodward as his lawyer. Stan Woodward, who's now ethically compromised and has to basically disclose that in front of the jury. And that your lawyer's credibility will be hampered, and that he might pull his punches, and that he may not be as zealous of an advocate as you would like. to understand all of that, Mr. Nauta? And he said, yes. I think something that wasn't reported that I'm going to report here on this hot take is who was also in the room. Todd Blanche, the lawyer for Donald Trump, was in the room during this hearing. This was not a Donald Trump hearing. This is a Walt Nauta hearing. Okay, and the Department of Justice and the lawyers. Why is Donald Trump's lawyers there? Donald Trump's lawyers there with a dark suit with arms folded because he's sending a message to Walt Nauta to stay loyal to Donald Trump. This is no different, talk about life imitating art, than that scene in The Godfather where Michael Corleone is testifying before the Senate committee, right, about being a mobster, about being the godfather of an organized crime family. And in order to, they've got the star witness, Frankie Pantangeli, who's going to testify against him. And somehow the Corleone family goes over to the old country and brings over from, wherever, Sicily, Frankie Pantangeli's brother, right, who speaks no English, but is brought into the courtroom to sit next to Michael Corleone to send the message to the turncoat, Frank Pantangeli: if you testify, this guy may not go back on the plane, if you know what I mean. And then Frankie Pantangeli, spoiler alert, I mean, the movie's from like 1974, but spoiler alert, Frankie Pantangeli suddenly has amnesia and doesn't remember anything about what he was going to testify to. Did you know that poor sleep can cause weight gain, mood issues, poor mental health, and lower productivity? Sleep is the foundation of our mental and physical health and performance in our days. Having a consistent nighttime routine is non-negotiable. I know in my own life when I don't get enough sleep, not only am I irritable and grouchy, but my performance in work or in life suffers greatly. Introducing Beam Dream. You know we've been raving about Beam's Dream Powder, their healthy hot cocoa for sleep. And today, our listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, their best-selling hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Now available in delicious flavors like sea salt caramel, cinnamon cocoa, and chocolate peanut butter. Better sleep has never tasted better. Dream contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, melatonin, and nano CBD to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. A recent clinical study revealed Dream helped 93% of users wake up feeling more refreshed, and 93% reported that Dream helped them get a more restful night's sleep. Just mix Beam Dream into hot water or milk, stir or froth, and enjoy before bedtime. I've personally tried Beam Dream, and it lived up to the hype. First off, it was delicious and just a lovely nighttime routine. And secondly, and most importantly, it helped me fall asleep and stay asleep. The next day, I woke up ready and eager to take on all life's challenges and tasks. Find out why Forbes and New York Times are all talking about Beam and why it's trusted by the world's top athletes and business professionals. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/legalaf and use code legalaf at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/legalaf and use code legalaf for up to 40% off. Same thing here. You got Todd Blanche in the room, like burning a hole, glaring at Walt Nauta. I mean, the government, if I'm the judge, I wouldn't have allowed it. I would have barred Trump's lawyer from being in the courtroom. But, she didn't do that. And so you got the pressure of the Department of Justice to try to put a wedge between Walt Nauta and his lawyer, at least cripple the lawyer ethically and as an advocate in front of the jury in the future and make Walt Nauta think twice about it, hoping to God that Walt Nauta finally realizes that he's been duped by his own client, his own boss, Donald Trump, and he can. There's lawyers that would represent him for free, by the way, against Donald Trump. Trust me. Not only federal public defenders that could be assigned to Walt Nauta, but also private practice lawyers that would represent Walt Nauta. I could think of a couple. I could think of 2 or 3 on the MeidasTouch network that would do it. So that is what we're watching. Why, that a Garcia hearing named after a case down in that particular district that deals with ethical conflicts of lawyers, that had happened is important, and we reported on it on hot takes like this one and on our podcast Legal AF on the MeidasTouch network. But the why and what does it represent, and the pressure campaign that we're watching on both sides, putting Walt Nauta between a rock and a hard place, between Trump and the Department of Justice, as the Department of Justice continues to try to, get him to flip on Donald Trump. That is what this hot take's about. The purpose of the Garcia hearing and its ramifications and implications in the future in trial, and what it does to Stan Woodward going forward in these cases. This is payback to Stan Woodward too. It's not that the Department of Justice could ignore this conflict. Judge Cannon might not think much about it, but it's obvious they couldn't ignore it. But also this is payback against Stan Woodward, let's be honest. Stan Woodward represents a number of Jan 6th insurrectionists, usually in losing battles. They've all lost, and they've all been sentenced to large sentences. And Stan Woodward was given an opportunity early on to have Walt Nauta be Yuscil Taveras before Yuscil Taveras was Yuscil Taveras, the IT worker, and come in and testify and make the job a lot easier for the Department of Justice pre-indictment. And he said no, because Stan Woodward is a true believer too, bought and paid for and got millions of dollars from the Save America PAC to represent these clients and keep them close to Donald Trump. And that's what you're watching. And so this is how the Department of Justice fights back. And this is the pressure campaign they use to both disable an opponent, make him ethically challenged in front of a jury in the future, and signal the only way they can, because they can't have direct communication with Walt Nauta. That's unethical. But signal to Walt Nauta, if you ever want to come in from the cold, here's our phone number. Come talk to us. It's like the spy who's, a double agent that needs to make the phone call to come back into the agency. Call us. Here's our number. We have your best interest at heart. And because the government has a long history, and there's been a long history so far in these cases, of witnesses, once they change horses and change counsel and get out from under the thumb of Donald Trump, they tell the truth. And it's always against Donald Trump. Exhibit A is Cassidy Hutchinson, Mark Meadows' right-hand assistant. Assistant sort of makes her job sound very low. It wasn't. It's a very high-level executive function within the White House and the Oval Office. And so when she had her Trump-appointed lawyer who told her to kind of misremember or don't remember certain things, it made her uncomfortable, even though she's in her 20s and she had the presence of mind and good judgment to ultimately fire that lawyer, hire her own lawyer, Jody Hunt. He used to be in the Department of Justice in the number 2 level in the Trump administration. And suddenly she was cooperating with the Jan 6 committee and with Fani Willis in Georgia and with Jack Smith in the election interference case and everywhere else. And so we have that going on as soon as we have a flip. Yuscil Taveras, same thing. He's represented by a Trump paid for lawyer. He lies to the grand jury. Indictment comes out. He worries about his own freedom and liberty and the fact that he lied and the evidence against him. Comes back into a court hearing supervised by the DC chief judge. DC chief judge tells him, maybe you want to consider having your own independent counsel. I'll set you up with the federal public defender right now. That happened. Yuscil Taveras flips, says I perjured myself in the which is a crime at the grand jury level, and testifies against Donald Trump. They're hoping, the federal government, that all of this pressure works on Walt Nauta too. And you see how late in the game flipping can happen, right? Pleading guilty can happen. We just had in Georgia, literally the day before and the day of jury selection for a trial that was going to start on Monday, at least the jury selection part of it. That's when Sidney Powell and Ken Chesebro decided to flip. So there's still time on the clock. We got 7 months in Mar-a-Lago until trial. And this is the drumbeat of the pressure campaign that the Department of Justice is going to do at every turn to try to get to Walt Nauta between now and that start of trial. I mean, plea deals can happen during trial. I've seen plea deals happen well before trial, just before trial, jury selection, day of trial, during the trial, during some devastating testimony in a trial, while the case is over but not yet with the jury, and while the jury has the case but hasn't yet deliberated. At every moment, a defendant can take a deal until there's a plea deal. Until there's a verdict. Once there's a verdict, you're done. Right? They can't take it. Once the jury has rendered a verdict, it's announced in court, we're done. But at every moment until then, even when we hear the jury has reached a verdict and is returning to the courtroom, you still can raise your hand and take a plea deal. But once it's announced in court, that's over. If the government wants to do something else with you, they can argue something else. But you are now guilty of whatever happens when that jury comes back in and announces its plea deal, announces its jury verdict. So you got to take a plea deal before that. We're going to follow all of these intricacies, bring it to you in hopefully in an entertaining way here on the MeidasTouch Network on this YouTube channel. It's the only place we do it exclusively right here. I do it on hot takes like this one about every day, if not every hour, at the intersection of law, politics, and justice. We do it on a long format podcast. Also, we pull it all together, top 5 stories or so at the midweek on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern time, at the weekend, Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern time, with Ben Meiselas and Karen Freeman McNiffalo and me, Michael Popok, the leaders of Legal AF. Until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.